For the tayammum, or dry ablutions, a person uses clean dirt, sand, even some sort of rock that powders. Pick something safe, of course. So clean and safe. And you touch it with the hands. And just like the ablution and the prayer and everything else, one should have the intention. But here we start with the palms and done. And the face. Some people say you have to use both hands to wipe the face, but both hands need to, are tapped. Now, some, the wiping of the hand goes to the wrist. And it's not that you smear the dust. You can wipe off whatever mud or whatnot sticks to your hands. Because it's not, oh, you streak your mud over, well, I got the dry ablutions. It's like, yeah, no, that's not what the thing is. And the same things that invalidate the full bath and the general ablutions, the wudu and the ghusl, they are, the same things. Now, the timings, as I've mentioned, the prayers in order for the evening, dusk, dawn, early afternoon, late afternoon. They are prescribed. And Surah 4, 103. فَإِذَا قَضَيْتُمُ الصَّلَاةَ فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِكُمْ فَإِذَا اطْمَأْنَنْتُمْ فَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا موقوتا. And when you've been satisfactory or upstanding with the making contact, that's the term for prayer, making contact, is hence the form, but then remember God when upright and sitting on your sides, and when you are secure, perform the formal prayer. Truly, the ritual prayer had been, for ones who believe, a timed prescription. Now, so we have a fear prayer. There is the changing of the position. There's possibly the shortening it from 4 rakat prayers, like the dusk prayer, the early afternoon and the late afternoon prayer, are shortened to 2. And even if necessary, it can be shortened to 1. And there's also the fear prayer, where one interrupts the prayer and fights the animal or person that one's forced to fight. Or if one is, and then picks up where one finished afterwards. And there's also the, if you finished at least one clear set through of prayer, standing, folding arms, bowing, rising and folding arms again, prostrating, sitting, prostrating, sitting and pointing, well, I mean, prostrating, and then you can do a 1 rakat prayer and have that finished if that's been the thing. But if you're passed into a second one, you can say salams, thus ending the prayer, because you're not saying salams to God. And they'll go get done what you're going to need to get done. It could be fire. It could be, the best action. It's the prayer of its prescribed time. The other best actions are other following the obliged prescriptions. And so the sunset prayer is the sun is set. We don't wait like the Jews till stars appear in the sky. We say it at the sunset. And we finish it before those horizontal lines of twilight go away. We're not looking for the false dusk of the vertical little streaks, because in that time we start our dusk prayer. And the dusk prayer, it's got to be done before those little vertical streaks become horizontal streaks and you have dawn. And the dawn prayer has got to be done before the sunrise. And we don't pray at sunrise, even voluntary ritual prayers, until the sun has risen a little bit. Some say about 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes, but it's clearly risen. Now, latitude and time of year can make a difference with how all this appears. Do you have to wait an hour? Because in some areas, a tree cover or whatever. No, you just have to wait till it's more noticeable. Just like the early afternoon prayer, it starts after you can see that it's afternoon. And some say those middle 10 minutes of the day, you don't say the prayer. More modern interpretations are, down to the very, minute. As soon as the minute that it happens is that high noon happens is over, then but that's not something they could observe. So I think it's best to stick to opinion of something that can be observed in terms of the prayer. In the late afternoon, the shadow is the length of an object plus its noontime shadow, and it's a double shadow time basically. Well, I mean, it depends on where you are. So the afternoon's mostly over. Some say about 5 nights of the afternoon. Some opinions are because of the prayers of delaying when it's particularly hot. You don't pray at the very hottest time. It is the hottest time of day, but when it is, I mean, in general. So some would delay it till, about 6 or 7 nights of the afternoon. And some opinions became standard for that. But that's a concession, more or less, that to make it easier on the people in those circumstances. But it's not a year-round thing, the narrations that point that out. But that is until the sunset. And a person should not only intentionally do these things, but do these things, work out your sleep in a way that is good for your prayers. It's not that, I woke up at 5 o'clock and no. As soon as I was up and ready, I performed my ritual prayers. It's what you do, and then you can go back to sleep. The prayer's a relaxing thing. It doesn't have to fight you. Now, some people are going to yell and do stuff that they shouldn't do, but that has nothing to do with it. And certainly voluntary prayers. You can do some voluntary prayer, but don't do so many voluntary prayers that you're too, tired to do a good isha, a good dawn prayer or something like that. And the call to prayers. Ancient Egyptians had the same thing. They had this double call people in the temple, something to start it, and then So it's not like it's not like any of these things are a new thing. In terms of format, but the adhan is to inform people in particular words that the time for a particular prayer has begun. It is a call for the congregation and its expression to Islamic practice. It is required as an act for all obligatory prayers. Now, the muadhin can be noted in Quran, Surah 41, ayat 33. وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِّمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And who has a more pleasing saying than one who is called the God, and one in accord with true morality, and said, I am one of those who are surrendered to God. Now, it said that Aisha is of the opinion that this is for the person who makes the call to, the person who is heard, who makes the call for the prayer. There's another verse I think that refers to that, but just like being in the front rows for the prayers, because those are supposed to be filled up by those who come to the masjid first. If people knew how much reward and merit was for these things, they would be, they would fight over them. And Bukhari is one of the people who's narrated this. I think Muslim narrates that too. Muslim narrates the elongation of the necks of the callers to prayer. But, not it does sound like trying to make them giraffes or something, but no, there's a different kind of fixings or something. It's not that. But there generally shouldn't be some sort of dispute or something. But someone who's going to be regular, if they're going to appoint somebody, but if the time comes and they're not there, unless you're in a big masjid where it's the same imam and the same caller to prayer for all 5 times a day prayer, and unless either one gets sick and someone else is appointed to take the place for that time, but they stand facing the prayer, and now some will do this because if you're unlike the prayer, the call for prayer it's loud enough for people to hear, so people protect their hearing by plugging their ears, and you can get a good 40 decibels or something. But you use your thumbs, don't stick stuff in your ear to make it harmful. But God is the greatest 4 times. My testimony that there's no God except God twice. I'm testifying that Muhammad is the messenger of God, the messenger prophet, because I talked about my 5 prophet way. If we're going to use the English term, there's 5 types of prophet, and Muhammad was the exemplar prophet and the messenger prophet. You come with the prayer, and that's said twice, and hasten to success is said twice. God is the greatest twice. And then there is no God but God, and that's only recited once. Now, there's supposed to be a narration that I've seen it, don't quite remember exactly where it is, but it's narrated that in the dawn prayer, before the dawn prayer, at the false dawn, where you get the little streaks, particularly in Ramadan, there would be a additional announcement that can be done. And so between Hayya alal falah and Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, there would be As-salatu khairum minat niyam. Ritual prayer is better than sleep. Recited twice. But in most areas, this is how they do the initial call to the prayer. And it's preferred that person generally just repeats along with to themselves with what is said. But when a person hears the term Hayya alal falah, they say La hawla wala quwwata illa billah. There isn't any power over or strength except by God. And after the call to prayer is done, if I recall right, there are different options, but Allahumma Rabba Hadahid Dawata Tama Wasalatul Qa'ima Atta Muhammad al Wasilata Wal Fadalata Wa'ab Atahu Maqamum Mahmudan Aladhi Wa'ad Tahu. All divinity, Lord, this complete call, and the ritual to be held, grant Muhammad the most favored and exalted position in paradise. You know, the Muhammadan al Wasilata, and raise him to the praiseworthy place that you have promised him. And the Prophet's intercession is not that we address the Prophet and intercede, it's that his intercession is for his community that has actually upheld his teachings. And as far as people uphold the teachings, particularly of certain sorts, the more that is for them. It's not that Muhammad is standing there and he's being told, okay, you can pray for this person on the Day of Judgment, and we're going to go on for millions of years with the him being told this and that and the other, and who he's supposed to pray for, and no, it's narrated that he just prays once, just like the others. So the second call to prayer, things are shorter. So instead of 4 times, you get 2 times. Instead of twice, you get once. And you have that extra phrase, Kitab Assalaat, the rising. We got the the establishing of the prayer. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya salah. Hayya Allah falah. Qad qamat as-salat. Qad qamat as-salat. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. And there should be time in between. And there's a reward of saying these things even when one's alone. But what's the call to the prayer, the initial call? A person is not to leave the masjid. And delaying the prayer call for, half an hour, and not, but there's issue with that too. Now, but a person, if they have a need, if they all of a sudden have to go to the bathroom, and therefore they should do that before the prayer starts, then they go do that. But it really shouldn't be the call to prayer has happened, and then I'll rush off to the bathroom. That's not how it's supposed to happen. You're supposed to not make a point of holding these things in. Didn't need to burp in the middle of this. Oh, there's worse, right? But any voluntary or even recommended prayer stops when the iqamah has been pronounced. And this but between the two prayers, sometimes there's voluntary prayers. Sometimes there's, and sometimes there's even recommended prayers, like between the call to prayer, the calls for prayer in the dawn. The best two vows of prayers of all, recommended prayers. By recommended, I'm distinguishing between, required, recommended, voluntary. So in the early afternoon prayer, 4 vows of prayer as an example. Most of the recommended prayers are like, in the early afternoon, in the evening prayer, you got 2 after. You got 2 after for dusk. You got 2 after in the early afternoon. So, and women don't have to make the call for prayer if they're leading the prayer among themselves. So it's not as urged as with the men, but there's no harm if the women call it among themselves. But a person, like particularly when there's a masjid, you don't just yell out in the town the call to prayer. You say it in a tone among yourself. But when you're calling people to the masjid, it's just, it's a different situation. And so the conditions for the prayer, well, okay, so if you slept or were unconscious for some other reason or something like that, when you can pray one prayer with the group and intend that to be the prayer that you missed, and then pray the next prayer, because it's not that you can, but these things aren't intentional, whether it's, and forgetting, if you forgot, as soon as you remember, you get to doing what you should do. And now, every little bit of good, every little bit of bad, and all that is is accepted and sees its result. But to have a sufficient ritual prayer, Assalaat, in terms of this age, is because that's what we're going over. Such a person would be somebody who is Muslim, and they've intended to say the prayer. They can't, they don't just accidentally show up in a crowd and, the prayer. They got to intend to actually be doing the prayer. Particularly, some people who don't get up and for anything. Maybe they're not able to. So, it's not just they're present. You got to actually have the intention. You have a certain level of cleanliness of your clothes and your body. You've performed the purification. You conceal the private parts. And if you're capable of standing and all that, again, you got to cover, Now, if you're going to, consciousness is going to fail because you got a migraine or you're sick or something, and, that may cause issue. If you're bundled up and you're praying, but you got to have, man or woman, you got to have your private areas covered, or you got to do the best that you can. And you face the Qibla. In America, except maybe Hawaii. Maybe Hawaii is southeast. Well, more, almost totally east, so I think. But in general, in North America, people, well, maybe not down in Mexico, but, for the United States of America, we're facing northeast in our prayer. And once twice a year, the sun will will give you, either you point towards the sun or the way for the sun, or, the exact angle of the prayer, because twice a year the Kaaba's overhead. I don't remember exactly which days they are at the moment, but Surah 2, 215. 2, 115. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَشْرِقُ وَالْمَغْرِبُ فَأَيْنَمَا Sorry, let me start again. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَشْرِقُ وَالْمَغْرِبُ فَأَيْنَمَا تُوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. And so the east and the west, and we talk about the plurality of east and west because it varies where you are, where the, east and west is. These belong to God, so wherever you turn, then again is the countenance of God. So you do your best. And so it's good to get children and maybe even the insane in the habit of doing these things, or to allow them to, at the very least. But, the requirement isn't there. And by children, I mean, when they're able to produce children, and this is at an age where the brain is developed, independent morality and the ability to make choices according to one's means, So typically 15 for a male and 13 for a female is what's narrated was Muhammad wouldn't even ask the people younger than that. Oh, he's 14? No, she's 12. There's narrations that prove that effect, that these were sort of minimum ages. But when a person's 9 or 10 in particular, then they're, a parent should kind of hold them to that and discipline them according to, in preparation for when they're accountable and have the choice of religion more fully independent of the parents. And that doesn't mean you should cast your kids out of the home if they don't uphold enough of the faith. Now, well, it depends on how much crime or whatnot they commit. Then, there could be issues with that, but you definitely should have these things presented to them by 7. And it's good to teach them before that. And, ways to identify puberty, of course, pubic hairs, the semen, the menstruation. Some people just get fat, so but often, the female gets a bit curvy, and like the song goes, "Lovely lady loves her." It's like that doesn't sound appealing. I don't know why they wrote it that way, but that's not an appropriate song. I was just saying it's something that you hear these things, and so there's things that are obliged in the prayer. There's things that are necessary. There's things that are preferred, and I guess there's things you can do voluntarily. Like there's a lot of options of what to say in the supplicatory, before, when you first start, before you recite, and there's the regarding of the there's regarding the congregation. You don't just say like 5 minutes of supplications before starting when you're leading people. I mean, in the silent before reciting Surah Al-Fatiha when you're leading a congregation. And I knew a guy who had problems with his marriage because he was like making the things into half an hour, but he tried to prostrate with it for 10 minutes and that sort of thing, and he'd be saying half an hour of prayers or so, and his family's like, if you have kids and stuff, it's perfectly fine to make your prayer, your obliged prayer 17 minutes a day, your recommended prayer is 12 minutes a day, your other prayers are, if you want to extend them into 5-10 minutes of prayer, that's a little bit different, but when you're going beyond that for, but it's obliged to stand, it's obliged, stand and recite Al-Fatiha, it's obliged to start the prayer, God is the greatest, in the modified praising position, because obviously, you can't do what a lot of cultures did, but you're still facing palms forward and up like that, so it's still a praising position. Now, but yeah, some people